Welcome to our weekly show for the National Association of Independent Medical Practices. You can find us at NAIMP.org. NAIMP is an organization focused on helping independent medical practices become more successful by providing innovative discussions, networking with like-minded professionals, and opportunities for growth, education, and increased revenue. Check out our website today at naimp.org.
Hello and welcome. This is Shirley Crest Dudley. Welcome to today's podcast. And we're happy to have with us today James Carchidi, Executive Vice President of the JFC Staffing Companies, JFC Temps, JFC Skilled Trades, JFC Medical, JFC Global. That's a lot. You're a busy person. James is a second-generation owner of the JFC Staffing Companies. A native to South Central Pennsylvania, he returned to the area after receiving his bachelor's degree in business administration from La Jolla University. James is a recipient of the Central Penn Business Journal 40 Under 40 Award for commitment to professional excellence and community. He is the vice chair for the American Staffing Association, a board member for the Carlisle Employment Skills Center, and simultaneously serves on multiple association committees. Jim is presently pursuing a master's in industrial and organizational psychology from Capella University to complement his extreme passion for applying the power of neuroscience to professional success. And I believe we're going to hear that today, your passion in the topic emotional intelligence, what it is and why it matters. So Jim, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Shirley. I'm thrilled to be here, and I'm super excited to present on this topic. Most of us have never heard of EQ or emotional intelligence, and that goes into what would be my first slide for those that take it upon themselves to go to the site and go through it, and that is you don't know what you don't know. I would ask everyone that's listening to this, do you ever recall being educated at school about the power of your mind? I'm not talking about our academic excellence or skill in math, science, reading, or writing. What I'm talking about is our EQ or emotional intelligence. You see, emotions, they're our primary driver of our behaviors. And yet most of us were never trained on the topic of emotional intelligence in our formal education years, let alone when we get into the professional business world. So the big question everyone asks is, well, what is EQ? What's emotional intelligence? Basically what it is, to dumb it down and make it simplistic and easily understood, is it's our ability to recognize and understand our emotions. And we want to do that so to best manage the outward reactions we have to them. Now, obviously, I'll be the first to say it. We live in an age of reality TV. It surely is entertaining to watch others fly off the handle, but it definitely doesn't help us in our professional and personal lives as we're going through the motions. Emotions, again, they're the primary drivers of our behaviors, so it's not our fault, if they get rattled or they're hot or down. I'm sure a lot of us have heard people either come to us and say, or others, hey, get a grip on your emotions. Well, the truth of that is you can't. Emotions are the primary drivers of our behavior, like I said. Yet most of us are never trained on the topic of emotional intelligence, and that's going to show us as we get into this how to really control the reactions we have to our emotions. And the reactions are where we can get into trouble or we can come out as success or as winners. A lucky few of us have been taught about emotional intelligence, but the rest of us, including myself years ago, I would say we fall under emotional ignorance. Self-awareness is also, like I said, is part of the EQ. And people with high EQ possess a keen self-awareness. They're able to quickly make sense of their emotions. TalentSmart, which published a book, Emotional Intelligence, they tested the EQ alongside 33 other important workplace skills. What they found is pretty amazing. Emotional intelligence was the strongest predictor of performance. It explained a full 58% in all types of jobs. What's amazing with this is, why aren't we taught something that is so important to our success? Very little, if at best, very few, actually have any exposure to EQ and understand what it is, let alone those that actually harness it and control it for their own well-being and their success. A lack of self-awareness, what does this look like? I wanted to give a practical example for the listeners. So let's take the case of Samantha, a practice manager. Samantha cares about her coworkers, but tends to radiate stress all around the deadlines. She's not always aware of how her tone and language affects the office. Being unaware of how she is perceived she can't figure out why employee turnover is so high. I would imagine and venture to say that we all know a Samantha. Heck, some of us even listening to this right now are a Samantha. And the key is the self-awareness, to understand basically yourself and how you're perceived by others. That's the first step basically in this EQ, this emotional intelligence topic. The next step that's equally as important, and I would say the two, as we get into this, are kind of on a seesaw. You have to balance them, and that's the self-management of our emotional intelligence. So we just went through self-awareness, and the next step that we're going to go into now is self-management. What is self-management? I'm sure a lot of people listening have their own descriptions and definitions. None are 100% right, none are 100% wrong, but here is the self-management definition as given by the authors of Emotional Intelligence. Self-management, it happens when you act or do not act. It is dependent on your self-awareness, and it's the second major component to having high EQ. And again, EQ is emotional intelligence. So I don't stumble on that word. I'll refer to it as EQ moving forward. It's the ability to use your awareness of your emotions to direct your behavior positively. This means managing your emotional reactions to situations and people. What I say about that is while we can't manage all of our internal emotions, we can and should manage our reactions to them. Like I said earlier, if people say, get a grip on your emotions, Jim, I would now tell them that's impossible. That's not able to be done. In fact, I probably said it to my wife a few times. But in any case, she didn't think it was too funny as I did. The lack of self-management, let's give a case study on that. What does that look like, the lack of self-management? And we're going to go through a situation here with Steve, and he's a dentist. Steve is overwhelmed. He's frustrated by inadequate reimbursement programs. He's constantly griping to patients during their visits. He knows it's not their problem, yet he continues to rant on and on and on. Why he does this, in his mind, is because it feels good to vent. But if only he was more capable of acting on his awareness that it's not the most appropriate setting to vent about his own problems, and he would abstain from such verbal outbursts in front of his patients. Because what Steve doesn't know is he's getting a bad reputation, and patients are starting to leave his practice because they don't want to hear him griping while they're having their teeth cleaned or worked on. So I ask people listening to this, are you a Steve? Again, let's go back to the beginning, self-awareness. Many of us will say, I'm not a Steve. I know a Steve, but I'm not. I'm not a Steve. I bet there's a little bit of Steve in all of us. And again, the first step is the self-awareness. The self-management then is to know that when you have these verbal outbursts or that your emotions are negatively affecting your behavior, your outward behavior, is to then manage it. I used to tell people the story to get through the story point through, and that is, imagine yourself drowning. You realize you're drowning, and just realizing that you're drowning isn't going to save your life. That's the self-awareness component. If you want to live and survive drowning, you got to start paddling your arms frantically. You need to kick your legs. Even if you don't know how to swim, you're going to do your best approach or attempt at it, because that is the self-management. Knowing you're going to drown is not going to save your life. You have to have self-management, which is kicking your legs and paddling your arms. So for those that have questions about it, I would ask to do the mirror test. Reflect on your past day. Think about times where you had that emotional roller coaster. What were your outward reactions? How did they impact your end results and those around you? Again, tying back to emotions and verbal miscues, emotions themselves are neither good nor bad. They're simply a psychological response to events in our lives. Our reactions to them, they are good or bad. This is where we have 100% control over them. I go back to the story about when my wife might say, get a grip on your emotions. That's not a possibility. Where I can get a grip, and I do have 100% control, is my reactions to those emotions. And that's what gets us in trouble, because where our emotions are internal, they only affect us. We can be in a down mood or an up mood, but they are internal and they affect us. Where we get in trouble or we succeed is where we have 100% control, and that's in the external part, the reactions to those emotions. To say something like, he pushed my buttons, he made me do it, that's simply an excuse. It's not something that I would accept now that I've learned emotional intelligence. You can perfectly control how you react, no matter how hard someone's pushing your buttons, no matter how heated and hot a debate or a conversation is. And while there are many things we do control, in truth, there are only 3 things that every one of us has any real control over. The late Stephen Covey wrote in a book, I can't recall the title, but he mentioned the circle of influence. And what is that? Imagine where you're standing and draw a circle around you. The circle of influence are things that you have control or influence over in any given situation. Don't cast blame outside the circle of influence. Oftentimes we do that by default. We're hardwired these days. Everything we see, the news, the media, reality TV, everybody's casting blame on others. They're not taking responsibility, maybe not responsibility for the entire situation or circumstance, but at least take responsibility for your part, your piece in the end results or in the circumstance and situation. Instead of focusing on what you can't control, Steve Covey talked about the circle of influence and focusing on what you can control. And again, what are these three things that every one of us has any real control over? One is your actions. Two is your reactions or responses to situations or other people. And three is your thoughts, beliefs, or attitude, even assumptions. Here's your defining opportunity, really, to achieve results you never thought were possible by focusing on one thing that you always have 100% control over, and that's you. We have 100% control over ourselves. I actually am privileged to speak to troubled youth that are in their pre-teens, and when I speak to them, I tell them, unfortunately, if you don't get off this beaten path and you do end up in jail or in the slammer, you will still have ability to have free choice. And they look at me like, what is this guy talking about? The reason being is if you are in the most extreme circumstance, maybe you're a POW or you are in prison, you still have choice. You can choose your actions. You might have limited choices, but you can choose to read a book and develop your mind, or you can choose to be ornery and throw things out the bars at the passerbyers or the guards. Both have different consequences. So even in the most extreme situations, we must always realize we have 100% control over ourselves. Sometimes our choices are limited, but the control is not. So this gets into the sweet spot, where self-awareness and self-management come together. And in the graphic on my slides, for those that do go to this site and review them, and I definitely encourage you to do so, a visual will help as you're going through the audio here. But if you look on the left-hand side, you imagine a seesaw straight across in the air. It's perfectly balanced. On the left-hand side, we'll have self-awareness. On the right-hand side, we'll have self-management. And in the middle, the chassis that's holding it up is the emotional intelligence. That middle part is the sweet spot, a high EQ. Now, when our self-awareness goes down a little bit, we're teeter-tottering down, and then the self-management goes up or vice versa, we're still in a better place, but we're not in that sweet spot, so we're not harnessing true emotional intelligence. And that's something we need to continually work on. Every day we teeter-totter between balancing self-awareness and self-management. One of the tasks that I always propose people to do, because activity creates habits, and when you get into a habit, it's like brushing your teeth. You always wake up, you brush your teeth, for most of us, with this hand, whether it's your right or left hand. So to make emotional intelligence a habit, I always task people, even if they're begrudgingly following this, is to try for just one day. I challenge you, I dare you for one day to keep a little notepad, and every instance you fall off balance, let's say every instance you have a challenging situation where your balance, emotional balance, and being centered flies off the handle. It's easy to be balanced in the easy conversations, the good days at work or at home, but when you have those challenging flare-ups, that's when all of this goes out the window. So again, the challenge is for one day, take note each instance you fall off balance. I'm telling you, it's amazing how often each day we miss the sweet spot of emotional intelligence and how it gets us in trouble. Too often we walk away from situations, whether it be in our personal lives or professional lives, and we realize we've done something wrong. We reacted to our emotions in the wrong way. We had a verbal miscue. Oh, I wish I could take back what I said to Mary. Or we have a physical miscue. Man, I really wish I didn't put my hand up to my child that way when they were acting out. There's always ways to behave better, and the way to control our behavior is that self-awareness, the self-management, and keeping them balanced, almost like a teeter-totter, straight parallel across. When we become unbalanced and unhinged, that's when we get in the hot water. So again, to recap the essence of emotional intelligence, it's something we have 100% control over. It's something that rarely, if any of us, have been taught in schooling or even in our professional careers. And those of us that have been exposed to it, many if not most of us exposed to it, aren't able to practice it, or we haven't created the habit to make it part of who we are as a human being. And emotional intelligence, it's strong. It's something that's going to propel you into success, whether it's in the professional world, the personal life. Emotional intelligence really is the foundation for propelling yourself successfully into the personal and professional life to be well-rounded. And what it does is it increases your ability to have empathy. It strengthens your social skills. It increases your stress tolerance. It helps with your communication. It reinforces and builds upon relationships. It makes you become a leader. The only way to become a leader is to first lead yourself. There's great leaders out there, at least they think they're great leaders because they're controlling the masses, but they have very low emotional intelligence. So people aren't really following them. They're compliant. They're doing what this leader tells them to do, but they're not committed. People that harness emotional intelligence and have that sweet spot balance, they turn compliant employees, compliant friends and relationships into people that are committed, people that will go to battle for them in work and in personal life. EQ also enhances your decision making. You don't fly off the handle. You don't make those knee-jerk reactionary verbal miscues. You also, it helps infuse your ability to tolerate change or change tolerance. You know, a lot of us, it's a light speed world we live in, and it's hard to constantly keep up with the change. When you have that EQ, that healthy balance, you can face change and have higher tolerance with it, and you can embrace it and use it to your own success. And customer service is kind of a cliche word, but what is customer service? The customer is anyone who receives the work that we do. It's people in your personal life. It's people in your professional life. Any conversation you have with someone, they're receiving not necessarily the work that you do, but they're receiving the relationship or the connection that you're offering. So customer service, you know, think of it as anyone that receives the conversation you're in or the reactions to your emotions. And just like any other skill, you must practice. Emotional intelligence is not like IQ. We're not born with it. That's a good thing, because even people with not the strongest IQs can be better leaders than those that have high IQs, because EQ, again, as stated earlier, accounts for over 50% of performance, professional performance, as measured by the authors of Emotional Intelligence. So as I'm wrapping up the topic on emotional intelligence, and I hope that you could hear and feel and sense the excitement in my voice, the passion I have for it, I want to challenge each and every one of you that is listening to this to look into emotional intelligence. Google it. Come across the book. There's many of them out there. But again, focus on it. Create a habit. Harness it and see the results you get. If not, at worst case, take the notepad out and track every time you fall off balance. Anytime you come across a challenging situation where you feel your blood boiling, your neck getting red, and maybe or maybe not, you had a verbal miscue or reacted in the wrong way. The key is to identify and acknowledge how many times, how many instances daily that come up that challenge our emotional intelligence. And then you'll realize, wow, if I can harness this EQ, think how much better my days will be. I also encourage you to follow me on Twitter. It's at Jim Carchidi, capital J-I-M, capital C-A-R-C-H-I-D-I, and check me out on LinkedIn, or you can email me at jimc@jfcstaffing.com, and of course you can always give me a call at 717-761-8095. And in closing, a lot of people say, well, here's a guy that oversees 3 recruiting companies. Why is he so into this emotional intelligence? Number one, it's made me wildly successful in my job as a young entrepreneur. Number two, it's definitely strengthened and fortified my relationships, both in my marriage and with my friendships and with my family. And number three, it makes my days so much easier. It's a fascinating topic. Like I said earlier, it's not something that's taught in schools. It's not something we come across on TV. And again, it is something that's greatly lacking in today's culture. Too many people get themselves in hot water because they lack emotional intelligence. So again, I thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I encourage you to contact me if you have further questions, and please follow me on Twitter if you'd like. There's a lot of substance and material that I put up there regarding emotional intelligence, conversational capacity, and the coaching management philosophy. Thank you.
Jim, thank you very much. I know I took notes, and this will all help our listeners and me personally and professionally. Really, really good information, and we appreciate you sharing your expertise with us today.
Thank you, Shirley. It's been a pleasure. I'm honored.
Thank you, and we hope that everyone will go to the website, naimp.org, and look at the slides. I think it's always better, as Jim said, too, to get a visual and look through the slides as he's talking, and also you can get his contact information there, too. And we look forward to talking to you again next week.